Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to in this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer with the $71 trillion truth, and I am recording this impromptu dialogue with my long lost friend, a gentleman by the name of Chaz. I won't mention his last name unless you decide you want me to say it, but I haven't even given him a heads up on what we're going to talk about. But I wanted to kind of wing this because Chaz and I go back to the 90s. That doesn't
Way
seem
back.
right. I mean, Chaz, when you think about it, and it's funny, I've just seen you for the first time in a long time. I see you in my social media periodically over the years. You look great. Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you. I like your hats in the background. I'm not even going to ask you where you are publicly because I just want to kind of talk about the issues at hand. And you and I, again, we go back to Los Angeles in the 90s, and I'm going to set this up more concretely, but to the audience out there, I think this is my boy. What did I? I'm up to like 754 truth bomb riffs over the course of 4 years.
Wow.
I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Yeah, I've been following you. Absolutely.
have you been? See, because I don't even know how much you've been following me, but that's what I want to set up, and that's why I want to see where you are, because I've kind of always known where you are, especially periodically. But at the same time, I mean, and we're talking about politically, but
Huh?
at the same time, life happens. We do what we do. We live in the four walls of our existence, so we move, and then things happen, and yet here we are in 2026, Chaz, and obviously shit's hitting the fan on so many levels, but yet it seems to be a concurrence, at least from my work. It's been an evolution of everything I've been talking about, but again, I don't know how closely you followed me, but at the same time, I want to find out where your head is first, because I
Sure.
remember where it was in the Trump administration the first go around. So I want to kind of get your, like, let's say, top level thoughts about how you're interpreting what you're seeing today.
Well, I'm not tip of the spear like you, man. This is insanity. It's absolute insanity, and it's every day is some new flood the zone with what Bannon calls shit, crazy making that is just a whack-a-mole political nightmare that is unending, and it's it's hard to grapple watching people like my mother of the old school that had a picture of how the world was supposed to be and it's supposed to be for their children and their children's children. Watch it just kind of dissipate into this miasma of whatever the hell we're in right now. I was
I
screaming
like that word, miasma.
it is, right?
That's cool.
Um, Up until like 2017, I was screaming not as loudly and not as widely spread as you. I didn't make a awesome documentary. I didn't go to the
Thank you.
anonymous out. You were like always 3 or 4 years ahead of me. Mad respect for what you've done,
Thank
uh,
you.
but in there was spirit and the heart, and did what I could to like rally the troops and like wake up, people, wake up.
Right on.
And then when Trump got elected, we left the country the first time. Not saying I was bailing on democracy and not giving up, but my mother retired and she wanted to go to another country, and I basically had to take her and get her set up, and then got trapped with COVID. Got trapped down there.
Wow. I
Yeah,
had no idea about any of this.
yeah.
Amazing.
And then so worst places to be, 75 and sunny with a pool. You're not trapped in a crappy apartment like Oregon or something, which I was for a while. But then we made a run back to the border to get vaccinated because I didn't want the experimental Russian thing that they were giving down there, and have just been gobsmacked with what's going down every single day. I wake up, I'm so tired of, I'm just exhausted. I'm sure I don't know where you get all your energy from, but absolutely exhausted waking up going, what crazy thing are we going to have today? What's this? I don't even want to use his name. Just what's this jackass doing now to our country? What's the horrible thing that he's shaking over here while we're not looking what's robbing over here, right? The trillions. You know it. You speak about it plainly. Um, yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell where I'm at with the state of affairs, for the State of the Union tonight, which is going to be a
Oh
live,
yeah, I forgot
live
about that.
right?
Right,
Live
right.
fest.
Oh wow, man, I'm glad you reminded me of that.
It's going to be a live fest. I didn't want to watch it, but I don't want to give him the ratings, and I don't want to give him the ego boost that he gets from that. Just want to be part of a movement which you have already started, but it seems like we keep taking one step forward and two steps back, and it's just demoralizing and infuriating. And but it's also making me dig my heels in, and I have a really big chip on my shoulder for taking it back to where it needs to be because I'm done. I'm up to here with it. And but as a little man with no big megaphone, it's kind of frustrating at times. You know, you follow who you can. You try and push up and repost and set the sounding alarms, but people are just. It just seems to me the apathy in America is like, well, somebody should do something, and it's like, yeah, why aren't you? Why aren't you doing something? And you know, you're leading the way. You're the tip of the spear, like I say. But
Let me
people
go
don't
ahead.
want to
Oh, go
jeopardize
ahead.
their
I'm
jobs.
sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Sure. People don't want to jeopardize their jobs. They don't want to give up they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be labeled as something. And it's everyone seems to be acquiescing in advance. And it's just, we need heroes like yourself more and more, man. You and your team, the Untouchables, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, you're beautiful first and foremost, and it's just such a great everything. I can't even tell you how stoked I am to see you face to face and hear you say that. It's been too long, my friend.
Absolutely.
But to your point, you identified, and this is why I wanted to do this impromptu because, again, to the audience out there, I had no idea that my friend, had to endure what sounds like a pretty amazing journey to me. I remember when I was seeing you a lot, particularly in those days, I'm going to say about 10 years ago on Facebook, because that was primarily our source back then, as I recall,
Yeah.
that you had a lot to say about, Trump, and you had a lot of good things to say from where I was coming from, right?
Uh-huh.
And, to further kind of, exemplify what we're talking about, but why this is so amazing, because again, I mentioned that Chaz and I go back to the 90s in Los Angeles. I was working in Hollywood. He's working in Hollywood. We're doing our thing. And I do want to plant this seed real quick. It's pretty amazing. We both knew each other through mutual friends, and we hung out on occasion and this and that. But, of course, the life, journey goes its way. And we both, had to follow our own paths and all that kind of stuff. So we're not intimately involved with what each is doing, but you knew, through my work, I did several documentaries and so forth over the course of the last many years. And I'm doing a lot more than that, by the way. I'm involved with all sorts of other things that aren't political, by the way, as I know you are as well. But, when I was in Hollywood to begin with, I don't know if you remember this, but I was working, and I'm not going to mention their names, but I was working on the lots initially of Paramount and then later Warner Brothers for some heavy hitter executive producers, and I was a small guy, in the on the totem pole, low guy on the totem pole, I should say, just assistant type work, and kind of working around, kind of getting my fingers in the business and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
What I had a front row seat to, because I was literally, at the apex in terms of the people who were making the business, so to speak, in terms of the big films and what we do and the huge budgets and yada yada yada. There was some weird ass shit going on. I mean, there was some strange, looking back, Weinstein like stuff that I was in the middle of, right? And because I'm a dude who, I never judge people. I never, like before I went to LA, I used to work at Club Med. I went to Arizona State. I've been around the block in terms of having a good time, right? And the
Sure.
bottom line was I end up in LA and I'm working for these huge things and I'm living like entourage, let's say B plus style, right? And but but
Boys Club.
but I saw some weird shit, and so I'm gonna tell you a couple of things just to get your feedback because I want to see what you have to say about this too. But first, I was in this office of this not to be named executive producer, and I get this phone call one day, and I thought it was a comedian pretending to be Bill Clinton. Now, at that time period, I remember I would get because I had to sift through the mail and go through everything for this giant jackass, and I had to be on call, by the way, 24/7.
Oh
Remember
yeah. Oh
that
yeah.
movie Swimming with Sharks? I was like working for this big dog with models and masseuses that were going between estates and all of these things, and I have to take calls in the middle of the night, just weird stuff, right? That I had to, they put me on the periphery to kind of organize, but I wasn't on the inside of it, right? But one day I get this phone call, and it was right in between. I was supposed to, here's the way that the story goes. I was supposed to get the Warner Brothers Gulfstream 4 jet, right? I had to get this secured for this guy to go to Aspen and then go to the Caribbean. That was the itinerary. But there was a lot of battling, let's just say, in politics between a lot of the assistants for these heavy hitters, where you had to like try to sort out who could do what. And it was all based on a favor sort of economy, if you would, right? Everybody had to owe people favors. And it was just this weird stuff. And I remember I get this phone call, which with this comedian that sounded like, I mean, I didn't know he was a comedian, but it sounded like Bill Clinton on an island with a big party in the background. And I was like, just reminded me of being in Club Med. Remember, I just mentioned that I was working at Club Med before and again, I was at ASU. I was the party guy, right? So when I'm in this environment, I'm like, I kind of see it and this and that. And it's such a trip looking back because all of it is so reminiscent of the stuff we're seeing come out of these Epstein files right now, right? So I wanted to pick that up first with you to see if you had any comments about, our culture of LA in the 90s and some of the strangeness that we would see with these kind of power vortexes and all the shit that was going down at that time.
Coming up like you during that time, you're a struggling actor, struggling other side behind the camera business. The strangest thing I found was, I was kind of newbie. I wouldn't say I was a rube, but from young boy from Idaho, trying to make it big, uh, coming up under some of those guys, what you're learning from them, you think is how business is done down there, and you don't know any different until you go work for somebody else and says, what are you doing? Why are you doing it like that? Well, I thought this guy. He goes, no, that's the evil wrong way. So you learn through doing it, but at the same time, you got to trust your gut on like, yeah, all this stuff that's happening right now, this is really bad, and this is kind of morally wrong. It may be fun with the boys club, but somebody's going to be a fall guy, and that's where those expendable assistants come in, where they can just throw you to the lions, right? Throw you to the yeah. It's luckily I had some friends that steered me and guided me before I fell behind the camera, and then I ended up working for some really solid individuals who like Yoda showed the way through not only just teaching but through leading by example. So I was very lucky with that. I kind of, to myself, I've always prided myself that I went out 1 degree separation from the big boys, and I was like, yeah, I'm good with that. It wasn't my cup of tea. I was starstruck, and I went down to do the acting thing, but falling behind the camera, I had a great run, about 20 some odd years down there. Enjoyed it, learned a heck of a lot. Like you experienced that VIP, which is fun for a while, and then it loses its luster really fast when you see that people half as smart as you, half as talented, and half as morally guided are making millions while you're making struggling trying to just get your card to start the next day. Yeah, so Hollywood's Hollywood. But boy, what a different world this is now with the Weinstein. First off, him with the Me Too movement slashing him apart. Thank goodness. I just think about all the people that sold their souls to people like him and acquiesced, and all the girls that didn't come forward for the Epstein, all those victims that are just by the wayside. Where are they? What happened to those thousands of innocent, well-meaning, big-hearted people that just got chewed up and spat out by these evil people? The day of reckoning needs to come for all their dastardly deeds, I think, personally. And we're close. It's refreshing to see, who is it? European countries. Wasn't there Korea? Wasn't there Britain, of course. There's somebody else new today
Well,
that just
Mandelson in the UK
yeah,
got
yeah,
arrested, and then of course, Prince Andrew, or formerly known as Prince Andrew, and uh,
yeah.
and all that business. But it's first I want to just respond that it's so refreshing to hear you say that that was your experience again, because we haven't really, caught up in a long time. That you did find, shall we say, honest and good meaning and well and professional like people, because they do exist. There's no question about it.
Mhm.
But there was this other sort of hyena like perverted madness of this thing. And when I was younger, and I'm in like my 20s, and I thought I could handle anything, and I did, quite frankly, handle anything. There was nothing that would shock me. Well, the Epstein thing, full circle, has shocked me. But to your point about Weinstein, just a quick segue with that. As you know, I ended up relocating to Park City, and I became the Sundance guy for a long time.
Exactly.
And me, and early in the years when I was actually still living in LA, I'd take a handful of our friends up to Sundance, and one of them was our buddy Mercy, if you may recall. And I
Yeah.
remember, yeah, one of our early experiences were, I mean, we seemed to run into Weinstein all the time over the years, and you can imagine Mercy had, I mean, it's just at parties, this, that, and the other. And like in the 7-Eleven right next to Main Street in Park City, just the oddest places, like at 4 o'clock in the morning. And
Ah,
and then this one time, I ended up at a party that Weinstein was throwing that I didn't even know about. But I was downstairs and I was hanging out, and he walked by me, and I intercepted him, and I just said, "Hey, man, fuck." I, I literally said something. I was kind of gushing in a sense where I was like, my favorite production company of all time is Miramax, and all the things you've done with all of my favorite guys, Quentin Tarantino and Brad Pitt and all the rest of them, right? I mean, that's our generation, really, right? And
yep.
and all of those films were so influential in that. But to your point, how many people sold their souls to be a part of this apparatus, played ball, eyes wide shut, which again is exactly what we're in the midst of. And that's kind of the corollary that I want to talk. Doesn't it make you kind of feel gross? And I know we both know people
Oh yeah.
that were in deep dive in this stuff.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There's some actresses that I knew had like a revolving door, and it was always like, are you an actress or are you providing services, or is this to gain favor? Never seemed to be conscious. Nothing on their conscience. They were conscious of their conscience. So yeah, that was a tough one. Some suicides, friends that fell
Hmm.
by the wayside. They weren't,
Because of this kind of stuff, do you think, or just
yeah, probably. They were,
maybe it was connected of like disappointment and like
but they were involved with major talent agencies at the time.
oh
So
wow.
yeah, I think they saw some stuff.
By the way, I
And
saw Casey Wasserman just got quit a couple of days ago, the Wasserman agency. Yeah, and then you see all these modeling agencies all over this thing. By
oh,
the way, I did know, and I mentioned this because I did an interview recently with the deputy investigation director of the New York Times, a guy that I've done many interviews with, this guy David Enrich, and he's now basically the go-to point person for the New York Times and all things Epstein. And I asked him in our interview, this was like a month ago, maybe it was longer than that, but I said, "Hey, man, it's 2026. What are you talking about? You guys could have nailed this thing like back." And he got super prickly and made all sorts of excuses. And I'm like, yeah, I'm
yeah,
like, I don't know about that. But I had the opportunity to, and I've got it, recorded for people to see. But I only say that from this perspective, though, because, and now I'm going to get into kind of the nitty gritty of why I wanted to talk to you. But we both come from this place where we saw people, because of the environment of this ecosystem, there's both good and bad. Not everybody's in on it, but there were plenty of people in on it, and they make a Faustian bargain, right? They make this sort of choice where it's like, look, man, I'm looking out for my career, I'm looking out for my ego, this, that, and the other, and it could lead to the darkest of dark outcomes, as you just prefaced. And I've seen plenty of that too. I don't know if I could direct it directly to some of the Epstein type stuff, even though they were certainly in proximity, and you've given me food for thought, quite frankly. But I will say this: there were a lot of, especially in places where there was a lot of money, where I happen to live in a lot of these places, right? Both in LA and Park City, been plenty of times at Aspen, Sun Valley, all the rest. You know what you get in these places, and I'm wondering if you ever saw this along your journey, right? People that were involved with fundraising, that would be like, they have to kind of butter up to like the vortexes of power to do this, that, and the other. And yet, how much did they see? How much did they know? What did they know? How did they get a proximity to power? I'm just curious if you've ever in your own life seen anything like that, because it just seems like way too many people were way too willing to sell their soul. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my fat cat radar is pretty strong, and I'm pretty averse to it. Quite frankly, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up whenever I get somebody in that proximity who is the money it's like those Wall Street bros. It's like they just exude that they think everybody has their price, and they control the whole narrative through their money power, and
Yeah.
it's just sickening to me.
And it's been our whole career, our whole adult
Yeah.
lives, hasn't it? It's
Oh
nothing.
yeah.
This is nothing new.
No. So yeah, you do see the suck ups and the sycophants and the yesers and the yes men, and I saw that route. I saw that, and it was just I couldn't live with myself. There's in those quiet times in the middle of right before you wake up in the morning, or right before you go to sleep. Those quiet times, my conscience just couldn't let me carry on with that. I tried. I mean, I tried to get into. I remember at one point saying, "Hey, my life right now is living in oblivion meets swimming with sharks."
Right.
Okay, and that was so spot on.
By the way, that was my life too. When I basically when I'm working at Warner Brothers, like I just mentioned to you. Go ahead.
Right, and our mutual acquaintance there probably still doing that to this day. I assume. I haven't
Well,
heard from
yeah,
him
and
on my part.
even worse, because I'll tell you, he's connected to the Russian side of things. Okay. So, and he has been from like the last 20 years, but that's another aspect of it that I've had a front row seat to. Seriously, like going
Wow.
back to like early 2007, six, somewhere in there, I saw I mean, up close and personal, massive Russian money flooding into Hollywood. And of course, where do we see Steve Mnuchin? Steve Mnuchin's one of the biggest executive producers in Hollywood during this time frame. Who's he playing ball with? A lot of the Russians to finance a lot of films that I love, by the way. And I'm sure I knew some people that worked on them, but it was like that was everywhere, right? And our buddy was his group of guys were those guys completely, okay? And I don't want to go into too much detail just in case I don't want to,
Sure.
look
Sure.
over my shoulder, but the bottom line is I wanted to establish all of that so that the audience understood that we've been there, done that, seen some crazy ass things, and we've been around. Now, I also want to, just pick your brain on a couple of things before I move on to, kind of the latter half of this thing. But you were super emotionally into making sure you expressed your disgust with all things Trump before the first Trump administration.
I'm not proud of it, but I literally, for the first 2.5 years of his presidency, every day I had a little mantra that I would post up on Twitter and to his account. And until I think it was Geraldo Rivera got his irie up and got me banned from Twitter for saying a certain phrase. And not too proud of it, but it had carried a lot of stock at the time because there wasn't any possibility of backlash of the threat of now. If you do something like that, they will literally come for you. They will turn their MAGA base and that eye of Mordor upon you and come visit you at your door. Back then, there wasn't that fear. It was more of just like, proletariat, fight the power. Except I used a lot of cursing and I took great pride in that at the time. And then I tried to use my platform with all of my friends, and it was a very small ecosystem. But I still tried to rally the troops of like, this isn't right, and I would just keep hammering it and hammering it, and hammering it, and it got to be like where people turned off from me, like I was preaching to the choir. I was a boy who cried wolf. Although look where we are now. So it's a bitter pill and also a point of pride for me at the same time. I just wish I would have had more of an impact like the stuff that you did, getting it out there with your connects and making a product that can be pushed and reviewed and streamed and built upon that you have. I was small fry, but I
No,
did my
but
little
wait a
part.
second though. I want to say this though, with all due respect, because man, am I so glad I heard you proclaim that, because I remember, you were adamant and you were right and you were totally spot on the whole time, right? And I knew that, and I was always, in alignment and all that type of stuff. And but then you went quiet. At least I thought I did. But then again, it might have been my life, because my life went through some really turbulent times. And ultimately, we lost track of each other. And then I started seeing you pop back up. And recently you've been feeding me some stuff, and I'm like, God, I gotta catch up with Chaz. But the reason I wanted to do so was to kind of bridge this in my mind as well, because see, I think what you just said is so important for many, many others out there, right? Because I know back, and we're talking 10 years ago, we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
at the beginning of this run of this monstrosity, which has only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And you were on it from the beginning. But to hear you say, that was before, and I loved how you just said the reference to obviously all things Mordor, right? All things, all things. Boy, what's it? I'm trying to think of the. I guess it is Mordor, but it's not just Mordor. What is the eye in the sky? What is that?
It's the Eye of Mordor. Yeah,
That is
that's
the Eye of Mordor. Okay, because I knew the land was Mordor, but I thought that was Sauron is what I'm thinking of. Okay, so the Eye of Sauron. So
right.
anyway, the the power that you just gestated was exactly what I think. First of all, let's marry what we've been talking about, right? So we both know in Hollywood there was a Weinstein complicity machine. Okay, there was fantastic work in the Atlantic by Ronan Farrow, who obviously is the nephew of Woody Allen, which is crazy at that, right? And ultimately, he did that work to reveal. And because I was saying the whole time, I don't know if you remember at that time, I'm like, it's a racket. There's racketeering going on. And I was talking about the financial system because that's where my focus was. But I was seeing it in all things vector of power, the complicity racket, right? Now, everybody out there at that time specifically, as I recall, with guys like you and I out there blaring with our trumpets as loud as we possibly could. And we came from a background of seeing this stuff up close and personal. And here was this transactional, what I hashtag Don the Con Rico Pedo Pig, which I could never have thought saying out loud 10 years ago. But now we know that to be exactly what he is. But he was never the mastermind of anything. He was just a transactional asshole in the midst of all of these things that we're talking about. And the point that I wanted to hear you say and then use that as a transition is this notion that you felt more free to be able to express yourself in the country that we grew up with, because that's what we did grow up with. I mean, I look back to my punk rock days and everything else. I would never in a million years think that guys like you and I might have to go, maybe I better not say that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's really terrifying. We've done a flip. Ronan Farrow and the Me Too movement proved to the world that Twitter is a giant megaphone and a huge source of power. And that's exactly why Elon and his Saudi money bought it on behalf of
Amen.
Trump, which
Thanks
is
for
so
saying Saudi,
ironic
by the way.
because Trump doesn't use it. He uses True Social.
Right.
So it's just the irony there. But I remember once he did that, I think it was Mitch McConnell said, yeah, if this continues, we'll never win another election. And then miraculously, he came up with the 40 billion, trillion, whatever it was, to gain control of that power, and has a death grip on that. They're never going to let go of that. So once I saw that, that was like, oh my gosh, they just gripped some huge megaphone and the source of communication power and getting the word out. I always have this. Sorry for the non sequitur segue, but I take back to the screaming that Hitler did in Germany at his rallies. But we're getting it delivered to your mind, not subliminally, but like a pen pal. You are reading it and absorbing all of the hate that Trump is typing into it. You're not hearing him speak, but that same power, that same anger, that same rage, that same evilness is being pumped into these people daily, let alone Fox News and all of that, but the his truth social, his truths that he puts out there is just a never ending onslaught of manipulation and control, and it influences people. And so, I mean, he's ruling the world right now by saying, "Thank you for your attention to this matter." It's not an executive order. It's not passing through Congress. It's something he said in a tweet, which just makes me lose my mind thinking of something like that. That my country would come to this, and that I can't say, "Hey," like I used to say, "F you, F and F'er," because somebody might answer it, somebody might highlight it, and then I might get doxxed, and somebody will come knock on my door and say, "Hey, guess what? We're here for you, pal." Or how about let's send out masked, armed goons with no repercussions to kill people in the streets? Didn't have that 10 years ago. So yeah, I do think twice about what I say now, which is infuriating and even more enraging. And so I'm this two forces. What's that called? Where an immovable force against an unmovable object. I'm stuck in the middle between these two passions in my life. One, rage to take back my country, and the other, absolute stifling fear of getting taken on by the MAGA crowd. So yeah,
My God, that was so powerful and so
right.
important, because that's not what I was expecting to hear necessarily, but I was kind of hoping to hear that because, see, first of all, well said. Second of all, you and I grew up like reading, Orwell books and seeing all the dystopia in our films and everything else that would in the late '90s
That
correspond.
would never happen here.
Right. And also, we saw Matrix and all of these other things. And we always thought that the American people would have kind of our dynamism and be able to press back. And that would never go to that point that you're talking about. It was insane to me to see how quickly it collapsed, how
Yeah.
many people were involved with it. But to go back to the very beginning, and I'm going to ruminate into the next direction here as a result of this pivot, right? Because I always knew the complicity machine from the beginning of my days in Hollywood. I knew how that worked. It was the money, it was the access, it was you play the game, you might be able to be in that revolving door and move on. I saw it, right? But it wasn't until many, many, many years later when I got crushed in the 2008 great financial crisis that suddenly I started pulling the threads, putting everything that I learned my entire life, not just from what I studied in political science and journalism, but my experience in LA, being around big money, all of the other things. And also, I come from a background, my dad's an attorney, and I've been around the law enough to believe before that the law is the law and there's professionals, and there's no way you could have a massive carnage of complicity. Again, we knew about the complicity machine in Hollywood, but I didn't realize the attorneys were in on it. I didn't know the accountants were in on it. I didn't know that all of the execs were in on it. You know what I'm saying? I thought there was just people trying to get ahead. I didn't realize it was the whole machine, even though I was in the middle of it, right? I dealt with those guys all the time, just passing paper around, whatever signatures, this and that. But I got a bird's eye view, but I never knew exactly how they were controlling the system, right? I never fully got that until many, many, many years later when I started to pull on the pieces doing my investigative journalism that would lead to my work initially in Forward 13 and then ultimately through the con. And I'm curious, before I move on to this last piece, what's your perception of what you saw me doing from where you were sitting with all of the other elements you were dealing with? What was
Oh
your
God.
perception?
Wow. I mean, just the fearlessness that you had when the bubble popped and the anonymous encampments started happening around the world. And I remember you took off at literally like a shot, like a spear, a tip of the spear, and you went to these places and you started filming and you started asking all the questions that needed to be asking. And amazing what you turned that into with the con. I wasn't so aware of the earlier part. I don't know the bridge that gap, but I know that your experience with the housing crisis, and then the experience on the street with the people literally taking on the man, taking on the institutions standing their ground. That obviously just got a fire burning in you. That I stood back and I was in awe. To be honest with you, I was like, I didn't know you could. I didn't know you. I knew we all had power to create something, but I did. It takes a lot to get it in the can. What they say.
Yeah.
You can talk, you can do all this, you can be all that until you get it in the can and you put it out there and you take a here's something I created. That's walking the walk. So I've heard a lot of people talk the talk, but you, my friend, walk the walk. So thank you for that. And so that was inspiring. At the same time, struggling with my own uh, second careers, and then life just happening as happenstance. Uh, it took me different directions that I didn't think I was going to go. Working low level for the government, it's that's been an interesting kind of experience in and of itself because that adds a little bit of extra after watching what Doge did to
Oh
people
man, yeah.
working in any capacity in the government. It's almost like, well, maybe you're a postman, maybe you're a teller at one of, low level government office or a secretary. Um, that kind of Nazi propaganda, tattling on your people that is now morphed into tattling on your neighbor with ICE. This whole government outreach that has been bandied upon us by Project 2025. And it's just, it's horrifying watching that playbook come to life every step of the way. It literally, you can go back and just read it, page 1, and you can go, okay, we're at page 23. What's going to happen next month? Oh, okay, we're going to go to Iran. Oh, we're doing that already. Okay, and then we're going to do this. And it's just the 7 pillars of religion that are being infiltrated through that with Mike Johnson leading the way. Sorry, I've got all these random thoughts coming at me like a
No, I
stream
love
of,
it. Please roll with it, bro.
but they all just kind of line up back to back to back to back and don't paint a really pretty picture. It's funny is the irony of watching some guy with a gun get murdered in the streets when every NRA card carrying, concealed carry person in the world would have come out and there would have been millions in the streets saying, "You'll never take our guns." Crickets, chirp when one of them, U.S. citizen, is murdered in the streets, right? And
Yeah,
then
man.
our Constitution is being ripped apart. Remember all the people that wrapped their cars with like the Constitution and the First Amendment rights and the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. You don't see those anymore, which is kind of strange. It's like, where did all those people go? It's like we've done a 180. Like now I'm like, yeah, we should be able to carry guns. When I was like, the hardest to get fighting against the NRA, and like I was like, can we just do London now, where there's no guns anywhere? But now I'm like, hey, if you have, which is another thought. How come immigrants aren't carrying AR-15s with them as they go between work, like their legal right has them to do? I bet they wouldn't get taken down in a traffic jam if they were carrying a nice big old weapon like that, right? See, these are all.
Yeah, no, great questions, man. And it's not again like when you think back, just in terms of gun violence, like man, I came from Texas originally, but I mean, lived in Arizona, Utah, been all around the West where there's open carry, and Los Angeles inside, South Central and all the rest of it. And to your point, it's kind of like, yeah, I always in those days would have expected under the circumstances of an Alex Preddy. But again, what's gotten obviously upside down, inside out, perverted, twisted, all the rest of it is that okay, here's this nurse who's a hero who is works in Veterans Affairs, and he protects a woman who is being basically beat down by the jackboots, right? And he doesn't even pull his gun, and then right there on the spot is assassinated, right? It's like the worst of the worst, like you just said, the Second Amendment nuts that have been talking about this on display in front of their face. And to your point, I think it's brilliant, as was all of the rest. Silence, right? Now, silence, as you know, is complicity. And what I love what you just said about, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but I want to just use this as a jumping off point because I want to get into the final piece of this because I think we're both in the right spot for this now. But when you talked about Doge, and what I've been saying to everybody over the course of the last many years, but particularly Doge as it was happening, in addition to flood the zone. And this post J6 and this, my knowledge of all things, Steve Bannon, Breitbart, Cambridge Analytica, all of the stuff that was going on during the first Trump administration, and all things J6, and not to mention Dominion, voting booths, and all things Fox, that insanity when Merrick Garland sat on a lot of this stuff with Jack Smith's testimony, not to mention all of the other, missteps, if you will, that I could identify because of my work in the con, because as you know, I interact with some of the top legal experts, actually the top legal experts in the world as it relates to corruption and fraud and corporate malfeasance and all of that stuff. They are the best of the best, right? So I've learned from the best because I had this incredible opportunity based on, what my journey was. But when you talked about Doge, what I was saying to everybody, and I'm curious how you respond to this, that, and you know this from your own personal experience, and you've even said it from the beginning, right? You were willing to be out front and vocal, during the first Trump administration, the first term, but then things got weird. A lot of things got weird on the way, and then you had your process go where you go, and then you also know that people. You've mentioned this earlier. People are afraid to speak up when their money's on the line, but meanwhile, Doge so that nobody is safe, right? Everybody can get steamrolled by this madness of corruption. And you've probably seen me say on many occasions, corruption births and fuels fascism, because those two things go hand in hand, right? And so here we are where nobody can hide, where now everybody sees the Epstein files or the Epstein class for what it is, that we're seeing arrests happen in the UK. We saw Brazil take down Bolsonaro. We saw South Korea defend its democracy. Here we are. We used to be what we called the shining city on the hill, the world's greatest democracy. Now all roles have been reversed, right? We have the worst of the worst paramilitary junta like scenario with ICE that are literally they have more budget than the Marines to protect a 5-time bone spur, 6-time bankrupt pedo racketeering monster of a freaking villain who is so stupid. He literally said things like 300 million people were killed by the cartels. He said that communism is 3,000 or 2,000 years old. Just the most unbelievably stupid shit. And yet he's got all the control, right? He's got all the cards because of the whole system. Just before I launch on this last piece, I want you to respond to what I just laid out and kind of how it impacts you.
Yeah, of course. It's gobsmacking. I'm rendered speechless at the fact that we have a moron ruling the world at this point, and we watched it happen, little tick by tick by tick by tick. And if somebody would have told you 4 years ago where we would be today, you'd like, no, that's never happening here. Not on my watch, bro. Well, guess what? Yeah, it is. And we're here now. And only us can save us. I hope the rest of the world will be able to somehow get the true Epstein stuff out, and we can see it from afar and come from where they can't control in the foreign countries in releasing the actual true stuff, the videos, the pictures, the true stuff that actually might make a shift in people's like, hey, we don't have to take this anymore. Let's actually all take to the streets. Let's all go to the voting booths and get rid of this and cut this just cancer out of America once and for all. But
Love it. I love it because see what I always say is the chemo for the tumor of lies is the truth.
yes,
That's how I organize it in my structure in my mind. And So I'm going to share my screen with you because, I don't know how much you know of what I put out there, but you've identified all the important stuff today, and we all live in the four walls of our existence, and you've got things to do, I've got things to do, but yet you know from afar what I've done, but at the same time, you're still dealing, and yet there's got to be something out there that moves the needle and turns the table on this immensity, monstrosity, this Godzilla of lies in this ocean of madness. And you had prefaced Project 2025. Now, what I've revealed, as you may or may not be aware, but in my work, I got deeper and deeper and deeper into the understanding of how we have become absolutely corrupt to a point that is beyond anybody's comprehension writ large because the flood the zone, right? There's so much information, it's hard to focus. And to that point, too, I'll just make a statement and I'll ask you to push back if you disagree with this. But at the moment, and I'll use Epstein as the ultimate catch all here. So it was revealed, I'd say the final piece of the puzzle for me just recently, even though I didn't need it, but it certainly helped me because I know a lot of details about a lot of stuff. But President Obama's former chief counsel ended up going through the revolving door, a young, very talented woman by the name of Catherine Brummel, who ended up as none other than the Attorney General of Goldman Sachs, the world's largest vampire squid, as it turns out, was mentioned in the Epstein files over 11,000 times, more so than anybody else. Okay. Because a lot of the Democrats, and I love what Ro Khanna's doing. I'm a fan of Ro Khanna, but I can tell by Ro Khanna he's a very smart guy. But at the same time, you can see him think out loud. How far can I take this? Because don't forget, he comes out of Silicon Valley at the behest of a lot of the tech bro billionaires. I promise you, they got a lot of influence on Ro Khanna, even though he's doing a lot of good stuff. And Raskin seems to be a really smart guy as well. And we know, Bernie's been doing his thing. We know AOC's been doing her thing. But from where I'm coming from, none of them have a plan to root and stem a plan that's requisite to corruption that we're in the midst of. Would you push back against that, or would you agree with that?
Absolutely not. I would not push back. The problem is we're all grasping at straws of we wanted somebody to lead the way. We wanted Obama to be the first black president. We wanted strong a woman to be president. We all wanted to get behind some movement that had some teeth. And right now, they're like you said, these certain people are speaking the truth, but they do seem limited or hindered by their situations. So,
or hindered being the key collateral here, because remember what we were talking about a little while earlier in our industry in Hollywood, there was the complicity racket. People played by the rules of the corruption a lot. Not you, not me, but a lot of people did. And a lot of those people, like you said, rose to the top of the ranks, right? The same with politics because of the revolving door and corruption. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And I appreciate you saying that because I don't know how much you know about this, but I'm going to introduce this to the audience with your reaction because I think, and what I was hoping for, and you've delivered beyond my wildest dreams, Chaz, to be a surrogate for so many millions of people out there who have the same questions, the same concerns, the same fears, maybe even the same evolution that you have over the years, right? So I think that they can relate to what you are saying in a giant way. And what I've always tried to do is get people to this point, but yet there's so much information, there's so much disinformation, the flood the zone that we talked about, and all of the lies through mainstream and this and that, that people don't even know how to get a bearing. And so what I created was the clean New Deal. And I make these statements, and I'm going to ask you just point blank in staccato fashion. I'm going to ask you to respond to them. I say we don't live in a democracy. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I want to believe it still exists. Kind of hard to say it does.
Okay. I also say we don't function as a capitalistic system anymore. Would you agree with that or do you disagree with that?
I think capitalistic on steroids. I think they're like the eight people won, and they're all the billionaires that won that capitalistic battle.
I understand that, but see what I say is that that's actually because of what the information I have. As it turns out, here's the biggest perverse joke of all. It turned out that what we ended up doing was socialism for the criminal class. That's what we did. We provided tens of trillions of dollars illegally to these bastards that raped and pillaged the world. And to put it into perspective, based on what I started with the 2008 great financial crisis, and it's comparing apples to oranges. So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying here in terms of trying to make the correlation. But just by sheer numbers, maybe there's 12 to 1,600 victims of the Epstein files, as depraved and horrible and ridiculously fucked up as they are. There were tens of millions of people that got crushed by the 2008 great financial crisis that never recovered. And they have the same corollaries of which I did. So when I say that we don't have free markets and the law is unequal, we don't have separation of powers and corruption rules everything, that millions are beginning to understand the threat of Project 2025. Would you agree with all those sentiments?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the Clean New Deal, my friend, is democracy's answer, because I do believe in all of those things that we're supposed to be celebrating on the 250th anniversary, which you can't make this stuff up. We've got a
Right?
King Donald, and we're supposed to, celebrate the 250th. You remember back in 1976? You and I are still old enough to
Oh,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that a huge
Here it is,
celebration?
76.
Yeah, you remember how big big of a deal that was? All right, yeah, we're about to. I mean, this is our reality, right? So I'll present the precepts of the Clean New Deal, and then I'll just give you a couple of more pieces of information. But so the way I set this up is I've looked at this as a Rubik's cube the whole time. That you got to put all the pieces together. Like I said, I studied journalism and political science in college. I've seen the world the way it is. To really understand how things work, like an engineer, you got to understand the system. So the four questions I ask is, what is qualified immunity? Do you know what qualified immunity is?
Yeah, it gives cops the ability to kill without repercussion.
You nailed that. Absolutely perfect. Now, in a country where the law is supposed to be equal, does that make sense to you?
Of course not.
Of course not. It's a perversion, right?
Correct.
Yeah, we could talk all day about how that came to be, but now that we've established that, what then is judicial immunity?
Uh, is that basically what John Roberts gave Trump, that he can commit any crime as long as it's during an act of for the government, an act of doing his job? He doesn't have to be held accountable, right?
Right, but the Supreme Court made that they etch a sketched what really literally they etch a sketched was the 14th Amendment Section 3, because Colorado took the case to the Supreme Court that if someone running for high office was involved in an insurrection, the Constitution says they can't run for office. But the Supreme Court etch a sketched the Civil War history in the amendment and said, yeah, you can, when they created the executive presidency. So the Supreme Court is above the law. And of course, as you see this wonderful picture here, I always love this picture. I always say Don the Con Rico Pedo Pig is the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid. Or he's also, the Mad Magazine Mad King, which I know all of those metaphors work on you because we're the same age. Don't you love that picture?
You know, yeah, I'm tired of seeing it though, and I wish we would live in a world where we didn't have to see it.
Well, exactly. But I mean, how ridiculous it is when we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution that we found out that the cops are above the law, the judges are above the law, and the president is above the law. I call that tyranny. What do you call?
Same, same.
Okay.
Enraging.
Right. Any person would recognize that's bullshit, right? That's not the law. That's not separation of powers. And one other piece of the puzzle that I put in, I don't know how much you know about the Electoral College, but I'll just ask you this. Especially you come from Idaho originally, and I know you probably get the sense of this. So you know that a lot of the Republicans for years have said that we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional or representative republic, right?
Yep.
Okay, what that basically means is it gets perverse from the standpoint of rule by the minority. Did you know that the state of Wyoming, and I'm sure you've been there since we've last seen each other, Jackson Hole particularly is just filled with billionaires, right? They have zero taxes. All the billionaires conglomerate there, around there, and they have more legislative influence in the state of Wyoming with less than 600,000 people than the state of California. That's pretty sick, isn't it? right? So how does that happen? Well, the Electoral College, and I will throw this out to you as well. You may be aware of this, but Rachel Maddow actually did some fantastic work on a podcast called Ultra, where she revealed that back during America First, especially during the presidential run of former Senator Joseph McCarthy. I didn't even know he ran for president, but I learned it in that podcast. And they tried to steal the Electoral College using fake documents in swing states by forging documents with the electoral slate. Did you know they did that then? And second question, that's exactly what Donald Trump and the Republicans did in 2020. Were you aware of both
Sure.
of these?
And he just sent his lightning storm goon woman Tulsi to go grab all of the ballots from Georgia. To he's going to come up and create, like, see what they did. They cheated. They really stole the election from me. I should be president a third time. I'm going to be king forever now. Yeah.
Everything that Trump says, every projection is a confession, lie, deny,
Correct.
switch the blame, and implicate. You know, you and I have been around the block. We've seen guys do this, but they do this at an extraordinary level. And, you know, so is there anything here that you would disagree with the way I set the table?
No, but I do have a big question.
Yeah.
How the hell are we going to get there? How do we change what the Supreme Court says? How do we change the immunity that Trump is just wielding, unlimited power? How are we going to get on top of that unless there are 18 million people in the street and not leaving until it's all reversed? I just,
You know, again, you've been so spot on, Chaz. I cannot even believe it because I will answer that question right now. When you put all of those pieces together, my man, you get because we're 80s guys, I got to use the Rubik's Cube, but you put the whole freaking thing together, right? And ultimately, this is what the Clean New Deal is. And these are the precepts, okay? So let me roll through them real quick. So based on my work on Forward 13 through the con, what I realized and what nobody else in this country, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to the LA Times and all of the great journalists that have gotten bought out by private equity and billionaire interests have told us, and they've kept this hidden, and this has been my journey, right? What happened in the aftermath of the great financial crisis in 2009 was we didn't spend $700 billion on the troubled assets relief program that everybody was gobsmacked by because that came through Congress, because everybody back at that time period was like, we're spending $700 billion to bail out Wall Street? What are you talking about? We didn't spend $700 billion. We spent 33 trillion in 2009. Okay. Now, all of this I've got cited here, and I'll show you where. And I went the deep dive to get this. And by the way, Chaz, you know this probably, but the audience needs to know this. I didn't just do research. I didn't just go, we had millions of dollars of resources for me to do the work, to talk to the top people in the country, both the economists as well as the legal experts, this, that, and the other, to get this information. But I went further than anybody else in the country. That doesn't make me special. I just did the work to discover this, that everybody hid. Now, that was 33 trillion in 2009. Then between 2012 and 2017-ish, we provided another 16 trillion in quantitative easing. I'll spare you the details on that, but that's 49 trillion by 2017. Then in 2019, right before COVID, we pumped another $22 trillion. And all of this stuff happened illegally, Chaz. Illegally. And let me tell you how I know. Because Congress has always had the power of the purse. But what we did behind the scenes in the aftermath of the great financial crisis to float the global economy that seized up because of the largest racketeering in the history of the world, we flooded the financial system with tens of trillions of dollars illegally that nobody understood. Now, first of all, does that surprise you? Would you be surprised by that, or would you push back against that?
I would not push back against that. It's just, again, disheartening that we've allowed that gigantic a number to. I mean, I think we learned during COVID we could just print money and it just is, everything's going to be okay.
COVID part of it, and COVID happened after, but as a result of everything I'm telling you, that happened because, okay, so in the statutes, get a load of this, Chaz, and this is our first precept of the Clean New Deal. I learned, and they don't teach this in school or college, and I can't believe it's not part of the curriculum. But after the Great Depression, when the entire world fell apart, that would then lead to World War II, and 50 to 70 million people died, and all of the carnage that happened in the Great Depression around the world and all the rest of it. There was a guy by the name of Ferdinand Pecora, who was this incredibly plucky, bootstrapped kind of guy from Sicily, believe it or not, who got his law degree after he came off the boat from Sicily, and then he got involved with none other than, and you might remember this from Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York, but he got involved with Tammany Hall. So he understood. He wasn't an expert in finance, but he was an expert in fraud because he grew up with the mob. Okay. So he gets this opportunity to figure out what caused the Great Depression. And as a result of his work, we ended up with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Securities and Exchange Act to create police for the financial system. But then, most importantly, they created what was known as the Glass-Steagall Act. This happened in 1933, where we would separate, because we're supposedly capitalists, right? And you got to have people take risk with cash. So what we did was we separated investment banks from commercial banks, and they couldn't work together until, of course, the late 80s, when President Clinton worked with all of these bad actors that ultimately created Russell Vogt, who created Project 2025 with all the bad billionaires. Those guys created deregulation, where they got rid of the law for the guys that are at the top of it. And what we did was we enabled, because it says in the statutes, you cannot, Chaz, believe this or not, and it's all in this document, you cannot use the full faith and credit of the United States to provide exigent lending for commodities trades, especially real estate. They wrote that in 1933, and it's still on the books, Chaz. Can you believe the New York Times, the President Obama, X, Y, and Z never told that to the American people, that we gave $71 trillion to the guys that destroyed the world?
Insanity.
It's insane, right? So we got to create a new Glass-Steagall that says you can't give the full faith and credit of the United States to the mafia. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%.
That's first and foremost. The second, we always hear Bernie and AOC talk about this. We got to get rid of Citizens United. Let me ask you a question here, Chaz. Given everything that we talked about, when you were watching the P. Diddy trial and all of this stuff about the freak off, and like they would get like the lube and the darkness, and they do these trains on these people that had no idea what they were getting involved with while they were trying to become singers. Did that just make you want to puke?
Of course, absolutely.
And you know how that shit works, right? So my point with that is nothing good happens in the shadows, America. If you can't see it, that means something bad is going on. So we need transparency. We got to get rid of Citizens United. So do you agree with those first 2 points?
100%.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Because you came from a beautiful place, you know how pristine nature is, right? Now, right now, the Trump administration just got rid of the endangerment clause. All EPA regulations are out the window.
Right.
Everything is gone, right? So the war that's being waged on democracy and on the law and everything else ends up being this scourge, so that the oil companies and other major fossil fuel dirty energy companies can pollute to their heart's content. How does that make you feel?
Oh, I'm enraged again. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
kind of overwhelming, right? Because it's like, wow, didn't we learn all this stuff in the 70s? You remember back to acid rain in the 70s?
Yeah, they're allowing what they're fighting to let, like, basically what's the horrible chemical, cancer causing chemical spray
For agriculture, I would imagine.
yeah, what's that called? Come on.
I can think of a bunch, and I think of like all the big agricultural companies. Yeah.
Anyway, they're fighting to let the chemicals be used back on, or we're going to lose.
Doesn't it seem like they could just destroy half the world's population in a nanosecond through deregulation, because we're all going to die of poison, right? At one point or another. Okay, so what I'm demonstrating here is a lot of people get caught up in the fact that it's like, oh my God, the billionaires have all the power, but where are we going to get the money? So I just demonstrated to you that we popped, and you said it actually, that we popped money out of thin air, right, during COVID. If we can pop money out of thin air to the billionaire class that's raping and pillaging the world, Do you think it's a problem of money, or are we just giving the bad guys the money?
Yeah, you're right. But
So
that's because they've got control now, and
that's
that's
right. That's right.
how
And
do
you
you
said it.
wrestle that control back? How do
And
you
you,
rip
yeah,
that
you
back?
said it though. We got to get tens of millions of people to get their heads around this so that they can go, oh, they're pissing on my head telling me it's rain. I'm not going to be their bitch, right? The
Right.
bottom line is, where are we going to find the money? Guys, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Macroeconomics and fiat currency and the nature of inflation in M1, M2, M3. I don't have a PhD in this stuff, but I've learned a lot along the way. And I guarantee you it's not a question of money. It's a question of Congress putting the money in the right place. And let me ask you this. You've seen the last since, forever, but did it ever occur to you that billionaires pay to have idiots get into Congress so that they can never do the right thing for the American people?
Look at JD Vance from Peter Thiel. Are you kidding me? That's A number
Right.
one right there. And they're using Palantir to go through all the AI things, which are polluting and using all of the water to manipulate these and the elections, which they just bought. Dominion, a Republican guy just bought Dominion. It's all just getting loaded back up right in front of us. It's
To kill
absolutely
everybody of some sort, slowly or fast. I'm not sure which, but obviously with Preddy and Good. I mean, they're pretty trigger happy. To your point early, right? So the point is, I'm trying to make. Does it make sense to you when I have the evidence? Okay, that they provided $71 trillion to the bad guys that are basically the Epstein class that
sure.
destroyed the law. If we could reconstitute the law to take down the bad guys and then use money with smart people to create a renewable energy paradigm, maybe Medicare for all sorts of different entities that make a rising tide raises all ships. Would that be something that you would be in agreement with or in accordance with?
Absolutely. More power to the people. Let's make it happen, brother.
Okay. Now, the final pieces of the puzzle are we got to expand SCOTUS to 13, to your point, to be able to rid the Roberts Court of all things that do. But then we got to end qualified immunity. No cop should ever be able to shoot to kill without being held accountable. I'm not saying cops shouldn't be able to shoot to kill, Chaz. I'm saying the cops should have been able to shoot to kill during the J6 insurrection as much as they wanted to. They got held down, and now they're being used to extort through terrorism American cities. There's a big difference there, people. Now, also, we got to end judicial immunity. Nobody is above the law, including the Supreme Court. The
Including the
presidential
president.
immunity. What?
Including the president.
Well, and that's what I put here on number 6 in the presidential immunity. And then we end the electoral college. We institute term limits for U.S. senators and representatives, and then we prohibit all insider trading so that
Right?
people working inside Congress can't get rich, screwing the rest of us. Is there anything that I've said in the Clean New Deal that you don't agree with?
Absolutely not. How do we make this happen?
Well, let me ask you a question. How would you suggest we make it happen?
Millions of people in a massive coup take to
Let
the
me ask you a
street.
question. So the Borg just manipulates everything, right? And the Borg basically algorithms, this, that, and the other. What I've learned, and I'm no expert, but I've learned, and I'm learning more every day. But people have to like, subscribe, and share. They got to become activists for the truth. Now the question is, what happens if we don't rein this in now? If we don't get it back during the midterms? If we don't hold Trump in this unbelievable cabinet of sycophants and freaking criminals to hold them accountable, what's going to happen?
I really don't know, and it's absolutely terrifying in this run up to the midterms. If there isn't the most gigantic blue wave of taking back everything that we've lost, all will be lost.
I
And it's
love you, man. Can I ask you to help me spread the word?
of course, absolutely.
Can I ask, do I seem like I'm legit? Do I seem like I know what I'm talking about? Do I seem like, I'm coming out of left field and talking smack on this? Or you've seen me for
No,
14 years doing this stuff?
you're speaking. You're preaching the truth, brother. Preaching the
Thank you.
truth.
And what I say is when you've got the truth, you're bulletproof. When you have the truth, you're drinking from the fountain of you. So there is nothing to fear but fear itself. But let's go to what we're going to do. We need tens of millions of people to get electrified. And the way I like to do this, I use all sorts of metaphors, and it kind of cracks me up, Chaz, because as much as I'm not religious, I do think the biblical metaphors work. It is Armageddon. If you know the story of what do the evangelicals call it? Oh my God, it's the same thing as Armageddon, but it's the end of the world.
Rapture,
The rapture,
rapture.
yeah. The whole idea is that evil takes over and evil is everywhere and lies are everywhere until the light comes in, right? That's first and foremost, which I find ironic considering everything we're in the midst of. But here's the other thing that I always thought was really funny, and I wonder how this resonates with you. In the Bible, it says in the first pages, let there be light, right? But what I know from cosmology and physics and the universe that we know of through science is the Big Bang is exactly that. But it happened because of the energy of the supernova. That is the Big Bang. And so, what I'm saying in a metaphorical way to everybody out there that's hearing this, if you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in liberty and justice, who believes in sustainability, beauty, integrity, decency, dignity, harmony, equality, opportunity, all of those things, if we merge in unity behind the Clean New Deal, when you become the nuclear reaction for the Big Bang of truth, then we force the light into the darkness. Does that all resonate with you, my friend?
Absolutely, my brother.
Right on. Okay, so what are we going to do in addition to what I just said? What we're going to do is hopefully on the 250th anniversary of this country, July 2026, that millions of us show up in Washington, D.C., to surround the Capitol, to surround the corrupt Federal Reserve, the corrupt Department of Justice, the corrupt Federal Bureau of Investigations, the corrupt Congress. What am I leaving out? Am I leaving anything out? All of the different institutions that are there that are supposed to be the expression of we the people, we need to surround with all of this information, and then we need to lock arms in a civil right march to the Washington Mall, to where under Abraham Lincoln's gaze, and he said, a nation of, by, and for the people shall not perish from this earth, alongside the Martin Luther King, who said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, that we do our part equipped with the truth, even though we know that they'll come after us, but we have got to go peacefully to DC with the truth to push back and turn the tide on this madness, of which, by the way, I've got all the receipts as the producer. I could present this like a rock and roll show, quite frankly, with all the people, with all of the insiders, with all of the experts. Is that something that you think sounds appealing?
Yes, I'd want to know what the jackass in chief has in store for Washington, D.C. on that date, so we're not misconstrued as being part of his
That's a great point.
of people. I
That's a
want
great
something
point.
to separate the two. So he's scared of what he's looking at, and he's not saying, "Oh, they're here for me. I brought them all here."
Yeah, you know what? I tell you what, you just made an excellent point. But so we can work out some details. But in the meantime, we got work to do to get all the truth that I've been able to segue here to the American people. And I'll just point out here at the end that during as a journalist, obviously you got to have the receipts. Guys, everything I just said, you can find in the white papers at the Federal Reserve Act 13.3, the prosecutor versus the felon, the judiciary. If you're a journalist, please reach out to me if you have any questions. And I'm open to talk to anybody who might be interested. But I'm going to close this up, and I'm just going to kind of say here as a close, Chaz, first and foremost, my God, I am so grateful that we reconnected here today. You couldn't have delivered more for all of us, quite frankly. And I hope you're feeling good about it, man. And I'm wondering if I could ask you for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for all you do, man. This can't be easy. The burden you're carrying is very heavy, and I don't know how you shoulder it all the time. I hope you have a good support system. I know you have the new untouchables that you can lean on, but I just know personally that carrying that torch is a mighty Herculean effort. So thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for being a true American patriot. And more people need to be like you and take action, and not just like, oh, what are we going to do? Somebody really do something. So thank you, man. Really, truly.
Well, and by the way, we got to get all of this to the people who are going to run for the midterms in the office, because we got to create this platform, and that's really the whole synchronicity of this whole thing. But Chaz, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will say that we also have merchandise. We created a T-shirt that has that vision of what you just said. It's basically me pushing this boulder of truth to the top of the mountain, But if millions of you get behind me and we do this together, it becomes an easy lift. But when you push the boulder of truth on the opposite side from the mountain down to the bowling pins of lies, it's like take the skinheads bowling. You remember that punk rock song back in the 80s, right? So that's where I'm coming from. But man, this has been really a lot of fun, and I hope we can stay in touch and hopefully get together and have a drink at some point. But all the best to you, brother. And I really, really appreciate your time. And I'll talk
When
to
I
you
get,
soon.
thank you. When I get north, we'll definitely have that drink. Okay, brother.
Outstanding. All the best, man. My friend Chaz, be well, onwards and upwards, ladies and gentlemen. Please reach out if you have any questions. Take care, Chaz.